What's going on, guys? Clifton Denny with On Your Own Outdoors. Hey guys, so if you clicked on this video, you are wondering the same thing that all the rest of us wondered at some point in time before traveling out of state, and is the juice worth the squeeze? And to me, I don't think the state that you live in, nor the type of bucks you grow in your state should dictate that answer, yes or no. The quick answer is, I think yes. You're gonna see a lot of guys on the internet nowadays talking about, and it is true, the number of big bucks getting killed across the nation is on the rise, and it's on the rise in a really big way. So from here in Arkansas, I can remember being 12, 13, 14, even 15, 16 years old, and I'm 34 now, and back then in the area that I live in, if you killed a 100-inch deer, you drove around with that thing on your tailgate for the next 2 weeks to show everybody. You sent it to everybody, you took it around, showed it to all your buddies, to where now in this area, 120 to 130-inch deer is a really good deer in this area, where back then, like I said, it was like a 100-inch deer. So the quick answer to me is you should absolutely travel to other states. I've been very lucky that I've been able to hunt multiple states. For instance, back here behind me, that deer on the far that way was actually killed in Texas. This one is a Arkansas deer from here where I live at. That one's an Arkansas deer, and then that deer on that side was a Kansas deer that I killed this last year. If you haven't seen that video, the video of these two deer are on my channel. You can go back and watch them now. But what we're going to talk about today is the pros and cons to hunting out of state, and why I think that everybody should hunt out of state, just 110% across the board. And I think the reason for that is ultimately it makes you a better hunter. So I've hunted, I'm trying to go through this real quick. I've hunted Arkansas, Texas, Missouri. We're just talking about whitetail hunting. Kansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Delaware, Florida, and that might be it. 7 or 8 different states there that I've been lucky enough to hunt, and and Louisiana, and harvest a deer in all except for I think Louisiana, to be honest. But I was like 20 years old back then, didn't know what I was doing, took a rifle and thought that I'd just be able to shoot a long ways. But anyways, so the plus side to hunting out of state, it will make you a better hunter. So what guys don't realize is that whenever you hunt the same terrain and you hunt the same areas all the time, you get complacent. You get non-willing to change, and that pressure from hunting out of state, so whenever I go out of state, usually it's a 5 to 7 day hunt. And whenever I'm out for those 5 to 7 days, it is a grind. You've got to learn the deer, you've got to learn what they're doing, you've got to learn what they're feeding on, you've got to learn where they're bedding, and everything changes. As you go through all these different states, all of that stuff comes back and it packs into your arsenal for your home state. So in my opinion, if I could pan this around here, I have a wall full of what I consider great deer. A lot of people don't. To me, if it's 125 plus inch deer, it's world class, but that's just who I am as a person, because I don't know, it's just me. But anyways, I will say that in the last 4 to 5 years, I have killed the biggest deer in my life, whether that be in my state or other states. And I give a lot of credit to that from hunting other states. So I had a plan here in Arkansas, a way that I hunt, the way that I hunt the wind, the way that I hunt these ridges, the way that I hunt the river bottoms, and it worked. But then I got curious and I wanted to know, will this work in other states? Will it work here? Oh, Wisconsin was another state that I actually got to hunt like 6-7 years ago. But anyways, and all these places are public land. But you pick apart each one of these states and each one of these areas whenever you go, and you start putting your tactics and your techniques into those areas, and you see things from a new set of eyes. So it's almost like having a guy come hunting your property that has never been there, doesn't know anything about it, and you get to see everything through his eyes. You get to do that every time you go to a new state. So I think that's the plus side. I think the plus side about hunting a new state is learning so much. There's so much to learn. The day that we stop learning, you need to hang your bow up, hang your rifle up, and just quit hunting, because I promise you, with these animals, you learn, or should be learning, every time you go to the woods. So let's talk about the minuses, and I'm going to kind of beat up on a place like Kansas. Same thing with Wisconsin. I can't speak on Iowa yet. I drew an Iowa tag this year, so I will be going out to Iowa for the first time this year. But talking about these big buck states, so I'm going to kind of bounce some of the public land in Mississippi, Arkansas, Missouri even off of Kansas. So I drew Kansas last year. If you haven't seen my Kansas hunt, you're more than welcome to go watch it. I guess it was myself and 3 other guys that went out to Kansas, one of them being Eric. 3 of these 4 dudes are, including myself, are bona fide killers. Guys that here in Arkansas, we get it done. And so we all go up out there, and out of the 4 of us, I ended up being the only one to harvest a really good deer. In my book, again, our other buddy Logan did kill a deer. It wasn't the greatest deer, but hey, he was tickled and I was tickled for him because it was his first public land deer out of Arkansas. But I guarantee you, if you had all of us in this room right now, we would all tell you how much we learned by that trip. Now, the negatives is that everybody, it seems like, whenever I killed that deer in Kansas, everybody was like, oh my God, yeah, it doesn't even matter. You were in Kansas. Kansas has got giants. Well, let me tell you something. That deer and that deer are within 3 inches of each other. That one's from Arkansas and that one's from Kansas. But I'm going to tell you the big difference is whenever I went to Kansas, I spent the first 2 days scouting, and I walked 20 miles to find the sign to hunt that deer. And I think what guys realize is that when you start traveling out of state and you start seeing the effort that you put in, because you've got money, you've got time away from family, all these things combined together, you've got a short vacation, you got to try to get it done right now, you would be surprised, even shocked at how much effort you put into that. And I think if guys would take that and realize that back home, and you can't tell somebody that, they've got to go out and they've got to experience it themselves. But for myself, just speaking for me, man, coming back home and then realizing, like, I go sit in a spot for 3 or 4 days. It's a place there's a place called Cliffy's Playhouse. If you've ever listened to any of the podcasts I've been on, you hear me talk about that place all the time, and I've killed some great deer there. But 2 seasons ago, I went to Cliffy's Playhouse, hunted 3 days, didn't see anything, and I'm like, what am I doing? If I was out of state, I'd already killed a buck. So I immediately changed over what I was doing, used my tactics I use out of state, which is going and finding those deer, and I killed that deer the next day. So, and that video is on my channel as well, and you hear me talking about that I was sitting in my stand and I was like, what am I doing? And I went and I did something different. And I feel like you can't get those experiences without going out of state. So the next part of this is, do you have to go to a big buck state? And what really dictates a big buck state? So Iowa, again, I can't speak on, but I can speak on Kansas, because Kansas was something that I've been hearing about since I was a child. And my buddy Eric, he's real good with the internet and putting us in for tags and stuff like that. So that's kind of his piece to our puzzle, and he does phenomenal at it. So Eric got on there. We drew a tag. It was actually my first time ever putting in. We drew a tag. But I don't think that Kansas is any different than a lot of the places I've hunted in Arkansas, Wisconsin, Mississippi, Texas. I'll say those 4. Actually, you can throw Missouri in there as well. I did not see any more quality deer in Kansas than I have in any of those other 4 or 5 states. Now, what other people say is that there's a whole lot higher percentage of those bucks there. And I would argue that. And the only reason I say that is because out of the 4 of us that were in Kansas, 3 of us are dedicated hunters, hunt all the time, have proven ourselves in the woods here around the house and stuff. And out of all of us, I think 2 of us ended up seeing shooters, which were deer that were 130-inch plus deer. The other 2 guys did not. And so, that's like 50% odds for me in the peak of their rut and, the peak time of the year to be there. Well, to be honest with you, I could have took those same 4 guys to the public land that I like to hunt here in Arkansas and had the same success. Now, do I know I would have killed a mid 150-inch non-typical? No. But I don't know that I wouldn't have either, because I have seen multiple deer in Arkansas bigger than either one of these deer, and that one is an Arkansas deer, but bigger than either one of those deer. So bouncing Kansas off of just my 2 trips last year. Last year, I went to Kansas and I went to Mississippi. In Kansas, the biggest deer I seen in Kansas, or the 4 of us saw, was either that deer that is over there or the deer that I missed in the early part of the video, which whenever I saw that deer, I thought he was probably a 140-inch deer. Fast forwarded, I get home, I review the footage, he's probably a 160-inch deer. I'm bad about small eyeing them from the stand. But anyways, so we go to Mississippi in the early part of January, and Eric misses an absolute giant. I mean, 170-inch deer on the low end is what he thinks, and Eric knows what a big deer looks like. So this isn't one of the guys, that you just don't know for sure if that's what it really was. I wholeheartedly believe him. I ended up killing a pretty good deer. Jesse ended up shooting a pretty good deer. And so while we were in Mississippi, it was the same amount of time. So we went to Kansas, we hunted for 7 days. We come to Mississippi, we hunted for 7 days. And I can tell you, we saw more bucks in Mississippi than we did in Kansas. So rewind to year before last, Eric and I went down to Alabama. And I'm not trying to name drop people's states, so don't beat me up over this. I'm saying that every state I feel like has these opportunities. So we go down to Alabama, and if you've watched those videos, you hear me talking about we went on a freezer filling mission. That's what we were trying to do. We were here to fill freezers. And so we go down there, and in the first 2 days, we end up seeing 3 bucks that were 140 plus. Like, are you kidding me? We're in Alabama. I didn't even know Alabama had big deer. And here we are, first WMA we went, but we hit everything the same way. And that's what the purpose of this video is it's pouring all of your effort, no matter where you're at in the nation, into that hunt. So if I go back a few more years past that, I go out to Delaware. Same thing in Delaware. I ended up killing a small 7-point. This is before the YouTube. This is before the filming and all that stuff. I killed a 7-point out there, but I ended up seeing an absolute giant while I was out there. So my purpose of this is I'm not telling guys not to go hunt these big buck states, but what I am saying is I think you have the same opportunity in most of these states around. And if you don't believe that, most states have some sort of big buck classic, some sort of deer show, or if you're on social media at all, go to those states, look up, like Arkansas Deer Hunters or Arkansas Game and Fish page or whatever, and you will see the list of these big bucks that are getting killed in Arkansas. It's the same way with Kansas. It's the same way with Missouri. It's the same way with Oklahoma. All these states in Central America, to include Indiana, Idaho, Ohio, Pennsylvania's got big bucks. I mean, all of these places across the nation, and that's just, the central and north. And then you drop down and you hit Alabama, South Carolina, Louisiana, Texas. All of these places hold these big deer. And I think that what we do as a people, as a hunting community, is that we downplay the areas that we live in because we're used to always doing everything the same way. So, you go in, your grandpa killed a deer in this area, you killed your first big deer in this area, and I'm guilty of this as well. And that's the reason that I wanted to do this video, is because obviously, like I said, I drew Iowa this year, and I'm going out there, and for the last 2 weeks, I could show you a text message that I sent Eric last night. It's like, I haven't slept in 2 weeks, and we are literally in June. And it's because I found out I drew that tag, and I'm on here just constantly map scouting. Again, if you've seen any of my out-of-state videos, you will hear me talk about, I think, the most important part to hunting out of state or in state. The most important part to hunting public land, period, in my opinion, is e-scouting. Scouting those maps, whether you're using Onyx or whatever you're using. Onyx is what I use, but whichever app you're using, it's using those apps to find those places. I know some guys, we'll kind of get into this real quick too, guys talking about hunting a long ways away from the truck to get away from the people, hunting close to the truck. And I honestly think that the distance really doesn't matter. The distance from the parking area, the distance from the road, none of that stuff matters. To me, it matters on how obvious is the sign. So, when I go out of state, for instance, I'll be on a map and I'm not always looking for these places that are 2 miles away from the truck. Now, sometimes I am. When I was in Texas, it was right off of a road. It was one of my best spots that I found down there. Whenever I was in Kansas, that spot ended up being almost 2 miles from the truck. But where Eric and them were hunting wasn't. It was within a half mile from the truck, and Eric was seeing big bucks. So what I try to find are those areas where I can look on a map and I see the different colors on the map. Like, so you just pull up a map and you see different colors, and it lets you know that there's a variety of different things in that area, whether that be feed, bedding, ridges, doesn't matter. There's a variety. So it creates in my head a buffet. So instead of just going to one thing, if you don't think that's right, think about guys that, like Arkansas here, there's some parts of the state where it's just all ag fields. right? Well, you're not going to go sit in the middle of that ag field. You're going to sit in a transition point and hunt what we call ditch bank deer. Eric nicknamed those deer that, but hunting those ditch bank deer, hunting those those deer that are following the fence rows, following the low side of the slopes and stuff like that. So put that in perspective, more so of timber, CRP, ag mixed together, food plots. If you're on some of the WMAs, they have food plots and stuff like that. And whenever you zoom out, and I think that that's another problem that everybody has, is they find a spot and they zoom in, they're looking at just this little spot. And I think it's more important to zoom out at that and see what all is around there, and then work your way from a big picture down. So looking at Iowa, with us going out there, and what I've been doing the last 2 weeks is I literally zoomed out to where it was nothing but a topo map. And then I played off of that topo map to find how I like to hunt off of a topo map. And then put the tree effect and all that in there, the ag effect onto the, in the app, and put that on there so that I could see the transitions and that kind of stuff at that point. But it's getting a big picture, but taking everything away and starting in one spot. And rather, again, a lot of guys like transitions, they like different kind of stuff. I'm more of that topo kind of hunter whenever I have the opportunity. And so, you pick what you're good at and you start there whenever you're looking at this e-scouting and trying to find those bedding areas, trying to find those feed areas, and trying to find the cruising corridors in between the two, which is what I prefer to do. And that's how I think you become more successful out of state. But when you take those out of state trips, you learn so much to bring back to your arsenal to do back home. Because, back home, for instance, with myself, this one piece of public that I hunt, to be honest, there are deer all over that thing. But I always walk a mile back. I'm not stopping until I get a mile back. I start hunting out of state, and I start hunting these other places, and I realize that, a lot of the places I'm finding the sign out of state are close to roads. And I don't care, I'll hunt it because that is the freshest sign that I see. But whenever I come back to Arkansas, in my head, I have to be a mile away. And so I moved all of that information that I picked from out of state, and I put that into what I do at home now, and it makes me more successful here. So the ultimate answer is hunt out of state. Go somewhere. It doesn't have to be one of these expensive states, and that's this next part that we're going to get into, which is how expensive it is to hunt out of town versus hunting in your own state. So I do think it's extremely important to go hunt out of state. And if you're not going to do that, not everybody can afford to go out of state. I can't afford to be going on all kinds of trips, and I've still got a full-time job, right? So, and I don't have that much vacation. So I only get to pick 1 or 2 states a year, but there was a time in my life where I didn't get to hunt out of state. And so when I couldn't hunt out of those states, you can still challenge yourself in your own state by going to the opposite side of the state. Don't go from going 20 minutes down the road to going an hour down the road. No, pack your bag, pack a tent, sleep in your truck, whatever you got to do, but go to the complete opposite side of the state. So Arkansas, we're kind of spoiled. We've got some ag stuff. We've got some flatland. We've got some river bottom. We've got some mountains that, if you want to call them mountains, they're just really rocky hills here in Arkansas, come to find out as I start traveling around the nation. But challenge yourself to go to those new areas and learn the deer. Deer are going to do deer things no matter what kind of terrain you're in, but you're not going to know that until you go do it. And so maybe you go up to the mountains in Arkansas, the Rocky Hills, and you find out the way that these deer are traveling on big topo lines. Well, topo lines are going to be the same. A topo line is a topo line, right? So whether you're in 5,000 foot elevation, or if you're down here, on ground level, as I like to call it, but topo lines are topo lines. So you learn how those deer move in those big hills because it's more prominent. But then whenever you get to looking at your map, it's not as big of rises on your line, but you'll see the same kind of gradual hills. And so you can hunt now what you used to hunt like it was flatland, but now you're noticing the topo maps because you had hunted in the rocky hills that we have in northern Arkansas. So challenge yourself to hunt these other places. Now, talking about Iowa and Kansas, again, it's hard for me to speak on Iowa because I haven't been there yet. If you listen to some guys, there's 150-inch deer around every tree, and I just don't believe that that's true because they said the same thing about Kansas, and I promise you I probably hunted harder in Kansas than most people, and there wasn't. It turns out there was 250-inch deer in 3 days behind 2 different trees, but not all 3 days. I didn't see 150 all 3. So anyways, Kansas. I think Kansas was just over $500, $550. And to be honest with you, I told Eric after we went to Kansas last year, I killed a deer, and I was like, I'm never going back. I don't care to go back. Was it fun? Yes. I love hanging out with buddies, sitting around a campfire, sleeping out of my little trailer. But I don't think the juice was worth the squeeze. It was a 9-hour drive. It was $600. The campsite was another $150 plus the fuel, plus the food. And I really think that if I would have took those same 7 days here in Arkansas in the right time of year, I could have been just as successful. Now, with that being said, it depends on your mindset, because if your mindset is you're spending money on that vacation anyways, you want to go do something, you want to get away and hang out with your buddies, then it's completely worth it. But if you're going to these states thinking that's going to be an automatic handout, that's just not true. But if you're going to these states and you can chalk it up to I am learning, I'm going to these states to learn, I'm going to these states to pick up new information and just to hang out with my buddies, and maybe I kill a giant, well then absolutely do that. But what I am also telling you is that there are other states that I think are just as good, if not better, that might not have as much pressure, that are less money. So you look at Kansas and Iowa, and you're north of $500 to go hunt those. You look at places like Wisconsin, Arkansas, Mississippi. Mississippi was a little bit higher too, but Mississippi, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama, South Carolina, Georgia, some of these states like this are down south that get overlooked. So, here in Arkansas, we do get a little love from other states. Kentucky's another one, Tennessee as well, but we do get a little love from other states, but maybe not as much as what you would see in that Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, that kind of stuff. And our tags are around $300. So you go to one of these other states, you don't have the pressure, and you're saving a couple $100, and then I promise you the campsites are cheaper. 110%. I didn't even know that they made $50, $60 campsites until I went up north. Man, you guys are crazy. But it literally is almost cheaper for us. Like going to Iowa, we got an Airbnb because it's literally cheaper to rent a house than it is to stay in my trailer with electricity. And by trailer, it's a little 5x8 enclosed trailer that I throw a bed in. So, take all that stuff in consideration and don't overlook the states that guys don't talk about. There are Boone and Crockett's getting killed in every state, every year. And the other thing is, and this is going to be the final thing that I'm going to touch on, and I hope that you guys stayed until this long, but the last thing I'm going to talk about is what is your quality of a giant? So if you are somebody that has killed, 50, 150, 160 inch deer, and you're looking for that 170, 180, that's what your heart's set on, and you're not going to shoot until you see one of those, then maybe it is worth it for you to spend the $700 and wait 5 or 6 years to draw that Iowa tag, to go down to Southeast Iowa and kill you an absolute monarch, right? Or to go to Kansas and spend a month there trying to kill yourself an absolute monarch. But most of us normal guys, I can tell you, being me, I've got, 14 bucks that are over 125 inches. And whenever I go out of state, if a 130 walks by me, he catches the shaft every time. If he is I try to do 4-year-old deer now, used to be 3-year-old, but if he is a 4-year-old deer that's 130 inches, I am not passing him. And I get a lot of grief over that, but I'm gonna tell you what, they still make me happy, so I'm gonna keep shooting them. So for me, waiting that 6 years for that Iowa tag wouldn't be worth it. I didn't wait 6 years. This is the second year I put in. I'm not going to the peak area in Iowa because I just don't really think that it's worth it to me to do that. You put in every year, it's $60 a year, and then I think it's like $500-600 for the tag. By the time you're done getting one of those places, you're at $1,000. You spend, even if you're going to public land, you spend, $300 to travel, a couple $100 in food, $300 for your week stay wherever you go. I'm gonna be honest, man, you're getting pretty close to going to a high fence somewhere and killing one for the same money. And I'm not telling you to go to a high fence. I've never been to a high fence, but I bet it's a lot easier. So, guys, just my point of this video is it was heavy on my mind. I've been thinking about it because I'm fixing to go out of state and travel again. This year I'm gonna try to hit, I know I'm going to Wisconsin with XOP. I know that I'm going to Iowa with my buddy, XOP, my buddy, and then I'm going to go to Oklahoma, hopefully with another friend of mine, Zachary Capps, and then Might go back to Mississippi. I kind of want to hit South Carolina instead of Mississippi, but we'll see what Eric and them want to do. Eric's got a little vendetta with the big deer that was down there in Mississippi that got over on him this last year, so we'll see how that goes. But just taking consideration of what your idea of a buck you're trying to kill is, because if you're a guy that's killed a whole bunch of 100 and 115 inch deer, and what you're looking for is, your idea of a world-class deer is 130 inch deer, which is like mine. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to go spend all that money. What you need to do is go to one of these underlying states that people don't hit so hard, and they're not spending so much time on. And I promise you, if you come to one of these states and it takes you 5 days instead of 2 days to kill 130 or 140 inch deer, all you did was gain more knowledge. So you're really getting more for less money at the end of the day. But that's my take on, should you hunt out of state or should you not? I think the juice really isn't worth the squeeze at the end of the day. I think if you're not a die-hard, go hunt every day kind of guy, then why not? Yeah, you're not going to go anywhere else anyway, so save up for 6 years and go to Iowa and then hope that you kill one. But I promise you, if it was that easy, then everybody that waited 6 years would be killing 170 and 180 inch deer. In Arkansas, I tell guys this all the time, that most of the public land that I hunt here in Arkansas, if you want to kill a Pope and Young, if you want to kill 125 to 135, 140 inch deer, if you halfway know what you're doing and you've got 7 good days, the right time of the year, and I'm not going to tell you when that is, but you can do that. It's a very doable task. If you want to kill over 150 inch deer here in Arkansas, you're going to have to put some work into it. It's not just going to walk out, but it's very doable. I know one of my good buddies has 4 or 5, maybe 6 deer over 150 on his wall that are all public land deer. Here in Arkansas, I have 2. So it is doable. And I'm 34 years old. I've only been bow hunting exclusively for 6 years, 7 years. So it is doable. It's very doable, and it's not just doable in Arkansas. Like I said. Oklahoma, that's a hidden gem, I feel like. Same thing with Missouri. It's, actually, and I said I was going to end on that, but I'm going to end on this. And so just an example. So last year I killed that deer over there in Kansas, and I left Kansas on Wednesday, I believe. And by left, I was driving across the line and hunting on Missouri side while my buddies were still hunting in Kansas, because I just like to come back and hang out at camp. And let me just tell you that the first deer I saw in Missouri made that deer look like a baby. And then I hunted 2.5 days in Missouri and saw 4 deer over 130 inches. I hunted the same amount of time in Kansas and saw 2 deer over 130 inches. So that's a pretty good example, because those 2 areas from where I was hunting at in Kansas to where I was hunting at in Missouri was really and truly only, I think as crow fly, was like 24 miles. So, can you get the same kind of hunting? Probably not. I think the biggest pain in the rear whenever I jumped over to Missouri is it was peak rut and it's rifle season. So you had to work a little bit harder to get away from people. But Kansas was absolutely full of people. There was trucks around every corner. You go to Missouri, it was absolutely full of people. And, hunting around those people, and I hate to say it like this, but you start hunting the people. And whenever you start hunting the populace, you'll get better. Because what I do as myself is, if I'm looking and there's 2 ridges on a map, and then I get there and I'm like, I don't know which ridge I'm going to get to, and I'm going to want to hunt, and then I pull up and there's 4 trucks going to this one, there's no trucks going to this one. Well, guess what? The population on this ridge probably just doubled, because all of those guys are pushed into this area, and it's probably got all those mature deer pushed over to this side. So my area that was this big that I was trying to figure out how to hunt just shrunk down to something this size. So guys, that's my take on, should you hunt out of state or not. I think pack your bag, save your money, go mow some yards over the summertime. And you laugh at that, but that's how I started doing it. And go hunt somewhere. Like I said, you don't have to hunt out of state. Go to the opposite side of your state if that's what you want to do. That's how I started. I'm from here in Central Arkansas. Went to North Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. I've been to Southeast Arkansas. I've been over to East Arkansas, over to Southwest, and I've killed deer in all of them. And I kind of bounced around. Arkansas, we're spoiled. We've got multiple kinds of terrain. Realized that the way that I like to hunt worked in all of them. And so then I was like, I want to see what it'll do in other states. And It's not doing too bad. So anyways, guys, that's all I got for y'all today. This is the conversation I think everybody needs to have with themselves on how to make themselves better, because the day that we stop trying to learn, the day that we stop trying to do better than we did yesterday in any aspects of life, then they might as well go ahead and put you in a box. My goal is, whenever I drop my kid off every day, whether it be school or daycare, I ask him what his goal is, and his goal is to be better than yesterday. Good hunting, guys. We'll see you from a tree.